It is the middle of the 13th century, and the world of Christendom holds its breath. From the ports of France, an armada gathers beneath royal banners, sails swelling with wind and prophecy. At its head is not a mere noble or ambitious lord, but a crowned king, Louis IX, sworn before God to reclaim what generations have bled for. Across the Mediterranean, the fortified cities of Egypt stand like stone guardians of the Islamic world, guarding the road to Jerusalem itself. The scars of previous crusades are fresh, their failures whispered in courts and cloisters alike. Yet this new host believes its cause to be sacred, its outcome foreordained. But destiny is rarely kind to certainty. Ahead lie traitorous waters, burning deserts, disease, capture, and a reckoning that will test not only armies, but faith itself. This is the story of the 7th Crusade, where a king sets out to save a holy land and instead must struggle to save his own soul.
It is the year 1248, and across the kingdoms of Europe, the air is thick with rumor, prophecy, and unease. The Holy Land has slipped further from Christian control, and the memory of past crusades hangs over the courts of Christendom like a fading but unhealed wound. In France, however, one man refuses to let the memory fade. He is not a knight in search of glory, nor a monk carried away by visions, but a king, Louis IX of his name, young, austere, and utterly convinced that heaven itself has laid a burden upon his shoulders. Louis has nearly died once already. Struck down by sickness years earlier, his body had grown cold and rigid, and those gathered around his bed whispered prayers not for recovery, but for the repose of his soul. Then, against all expectation, his eyes opened and breath returned to him. In the fevered days that followed, Louis swore that this life restored was no accident of nature, it was a divine summons. If God had spared him, it was not for comfort, nor for earthly splendor, but for war, for the liberation of Jerusalem and the defense of the cross. From that moment, the image of the East would not leave him. Reports from pilgrims and envoys poured into Paris, of embattled Christian outposts, of Muslim rulers growing stronger in Egypt, of the loss of sacred cities once consecrated by the blood of martyrs. Louis listened, not as a distant monarch might, but with the burning intensity of a man who believed that history itself was speaking directly to him. To his advisors, his mother, even to the clergy who urged caution, he gave a single answer: he would go. The decision sends tremors through the realm. Crusade is no longer the dream of wandering nobles. It is now the policy of a king. Taxes are raised, ships are ordered, and smiths labor endlessly to forge weapons and armor. Monks preach in marketplaces and cathedrals alike, their voices ringing off stone walls as they declare that whoever marches with Louis marches beneath the gaze of God. Some come for faith, some for fortune, and many because their king commands it. Whatever their reasons, they gather all the same: lords from Champagne, knights from Normandy, peasants from distant villages who have never seen the sea, all converging toward the great ports of the south. Yet behind Louis's solemn piety lies something more complicated. He is a ruler of flesh and blood, torn between the demands of his crown and the call he feels beyond it. To leave for the East means leaving France vulnerable, entrusting his lands, his children, and the stability of an entire kingdom to regents and oaths that may or may not hold. His counselors remind him of this with increasing urgency, but Louis answers them not with anger, but with unwavering simplicity. A king, he insists, is answerable not only to his people, but to the judge of all kings. On the day he takes the cross publicly, the moment is etched forever in the minds of those who witness it. Before a hushed assembly, the king removes his royal mantle, kneels, and accepts the crusader's emblem upon his shoulders. A murmur passes through the crowd, not of excitement only, but of fear. For when a common man swears an oath, one family is risked. When a king swears such an oath, an entire nation is carried with him into the unknown. Letters travel across Europe, seeking allies and promising reward in heaven and honor on earth. Papal approval follows, blessing the venture as a holy endeavor, a bellum sacrum, a sacred war. But even in Rome there are whispers. The treasury of Christendom is finite, the strength of its armies uncertain, and Egypt, Louis's intended target, is no weak frontier, but the beating heart of Muslim power in the eastern Mediterranean. Still, the king persists. His resolve is not the noise of youthful recklessness, but the cold, unwavering quiet of conviction. In the quiet hours of the night, Louis walks the halls of his palaces, past tapestries depicting saints and martyrs. He lingers longest before images of Jerusalem, the rocky hills, the domes and walls of the Holy City, the places where, in his mind, heaven and earth once touched. To him, this is not distant history, but an open wound, and he means to bind it, no matter the cost. To his friends, he speaks of duty. To his confessors, he speaks of sin and redemption. To himself, though, he cannot escape the thought that perhaps God has chosen him not only as King of France, but as instrument of a greater plan. Thus the stage is set. The greatest monarch of his age prepares to abandon the safety of his throne for the uncertainties of distant shores. The banners are stitched, the oaths sworn, and the drums of departure begin to sound. Louis sees only the shining path of faith stretching before him, but beyond that horizon lie storms, captivity, ruin, and a trial far greater than any he has yet imagined. For the king who heard God's call is about to learn that answering it will demand everything he has: his kingdom, his army, and perhaps even his belief in what that call truly meant.
The morning of departure dawns crisp and bright, though the air trembles with anticipation. From the southern ports of France, the fleet stretches like a forest of masts, sails snapping sharply in the wind. Thousands of men gather along the docks, knights in polished armor, their surcoats emblazoned with crosses, foot soldiers with pikes and shields, clergy chanting prayers that echo off stone walls, and an endless throng of camp followers, wives and children, each carrying hope, fear, or both. Louis walks among them, inspecting the ships, nodding briefly to commanders, offering a solemn word of blessing. To the common eye, he is still a king. To those who watch closely, he is something more. A man utterly committed to a vision of divine purpose, a sovereign whose faith has become a call to arms. The ships are not mere vessels, they are floating fortresses, timber hulls reinforced for war, decks crowded with archers and men-at-arms, holds packed with food, wine, and the necessary accoutrements of long campaigns. Horses are lashed in cages or stalls, impatient and snorting, their hooves striking iron-bound wood. Each ship is named for a saint, each sail painted with the cross that symbolizes the cause for which they leave home. And yet, for all this preparation, the sea is unpredictable, the journey perilous, and the enemy unknown. Louis knows that the Mediterranean has swallowed many proud fleets before, that storms and disease have felled the mighty, and that faith alone will not carry men safely across open water. For days the fleet sails along the coast of Provence and Languedoc, keeping close to the shore as the king inspects morale and organization. Nobles argue over provisions and tactics, but Louis listens calmly,
issuing orders with quiet authority. He is not a man given to flamboyance or overconfidence. His leadership is precise, methodical, and guided by the conviction that the hand of God moves through him. From the first wave lapping the hull to the last rope tied on the mast, everything is imbued with purpose, every action part of a larger plan known only to the king and the heavens above. The men, however, cannot escape the enormity of what lies ahead. On board, whispers circulate about past crusades, the disasters, the betrayals, the forgotten heroes and villains whose names are now buried in sand and blood. Some tremble, clutching crucifixes and rosaries. Others sharpen their blades, eager for the clash of arms, believing that courage and steel will be enough. Louis understands this mixture of fear and fervor, and he walks among them, speaking words of reassurance, reminding them that they fight not for riches, not for glory alone, but for the sacred trust placed upon them by God. As the fleet rounds the southern capes of Europe, leaving familiar shores behind, the sea grows restless. Winds rise from the west, tossing ships and men alike, testing the mettle of sailors and soldiers. Storm clouds gather on the horizon, dark and threatening, yet Louis remains unshaken. He climbs to the bow of his flagship, gaze fixed on the distant waters ahead, imagining Jerusalem itself, its walls, its temples, its sacred streets, and he prays that the Lord will guide their passage. Around him, sailors cry out, hoisting sails and tightening ropes, and the sound blends with the chants of priests and the low murmur of thousands of hearts beating with anticipation. Days turn into weeks, supplies are rationed, horses grow restless in their holds, and sickness begins to creep among the men. Yet still they press on, following the king's lead. Each sunrise is a reminder that they are far from home, and each sunset is a prayer for safe passage. Along the way, scouts report islands and coastal towns, but the true prize remains distant and shrouded in both mystery and menace. And so the fleet of faith presses forward, cutting through the blue expanse of the Mediterranean, a host of men united by loyalty, devotion, and the unshakable belief that their king is guided by divine will. They do not yet know the trials that await them, treacherous waters, hostile cities, and an enemy whose cunning matches their own courage. But in that moment, aboard creaking ships braced against the wind, the Crusaders are more than men. They are a moving testament to faith, to purpose, and to the vision of a king who has answered the call of God. The horizon stretches endlessly ahead, and with every wave that strikes the bow, Louis knows that there is no turning back. The journey has begun, and with it, the fate of a crusade, the lives of thousands, and the destiny of a king are all set upon the vast, uncertain waters. The long voyage had ended, but the true campaign was only beginning. Before the Crusader host rose the low, fertile delta of the Nile, deceptively peaceful, wrapped in green fields and slow-moving waters. Yet this land was no mere waypoint on a map. Egypt was the beating heart of power in the eastern Mediterranean, the shield that guarded the road to Jerusalem. Every general knew a single truth: whoever held Egypt could decide the fate of the Holy Land. Louis IX believed the path forward was clear. Strike Egypt first, break its armies, force the Islamic world to its knees, then march eastward as liberators, not beggars at the gates of distant kings. It was a plan built not only on strategy, but on certainty. Certainty that God favored his cause, certainty that history bent toward redemption. But Egypt had its own story, its own rulers, its own resolve. Across the river, in the fortified city of Damietta, the banners of the Ayyubid realm snapped in the hot wind. Veteran commanders watched the Crusader fleet with cold calculation. They had learned from past crusades. They knew the land, the currents, the seasons, and the disease-bearing swamps that wrapped themselves around invaders like invisible armies. Egypt did not just need swords to fight, it had the Nile. As the Crusaders set foot on shore, the illusion of an easy victory spread through the camp. The first clashes drove Egyptian troops back. Standards were planted in sand. Priests raised crosses above hastily built altars. To many, it felt like divine confirmation. To Louis, it felt like destiny unfolding in plain sight. Yet victories at the beginning of a crusade are often the most deceptive. The Nile began to rise with the season, swelling beyond its banks, turning open fields into shifting marsh. Roads vanished, supply lines drowned, horses sank belly-deep in mud. What looked like land became water, and what looked like water became traps. Egyptian skirmishers struck from reed-choked channels and disappeared as if swallowed by the river itself. Then came the heat, relentless, airless, suffocating. Armor burned skin, helmets became ovens, food spoiled, water rotted. The same army that had crossed the sea full of hymns and confidence now found itself battling an enemy that could not be driven back by sword or prayer, the land itself. Egypt watched and waited. Inside Damietta, commanders reorganized. Messengers galloped south toward Cairo. A new power was rising, disciplined slave soldiers hardened by war, the Mamluks. They were not kings, but they were soldiers to the bone, and they understood what the Crusaders had not yet realized. Patience could kill faster than steel. Meanwhile, in the Crusader camp, tension began to crackle beneath the surface. Some nobles urged bold action, others warned of disaster. Maps were debated by torchlight, and every decision seemed to split the army rather than unite it. Disease crept through the tents in silence, fever, dysentery, infection, as deadly as any ambush. Still, Louis refused retreat. He had not come across an ocean to turn back at the edge of promise. Egypt, to him, was not a quagmire, it was a gateway. Beyond its cities lay Cairo, beyond Cairo, leverage, beyond leverage, Jerusalem. So the king gave the order that would decide everything. Advance inland. Follow the Nile toward the fortress city of Mansoura. Force Egypt to its knees. It was a decision made in faith and into the narrowing jaws of a trap. Because ahead, waiting in dust and rising floodwater, stood commanders who did not fear kings, who did not fear crusader legends, who did not fear the cross or the crown. They were about to make their stand, and the 7th Crusade was about to cross the invisible line between boldness and catastrophe.
The road to Mansoura looked straightforward on the map. In reality, it was a maze, shifting waterways, flooded fields, invisible channels where the Nile split and rejoined like a living thing. To advance was to gamble against a river that had already chosen its side. At first, progress seemed possible. Bridges were built, rafts were lashed together, engineers worked knee-deep in mud while priests blessed the timbers. Scouts returned with reports of empty ground ahead, abandoned villages, fields stripped of grain. To many crusaders, it appeared that Egypt was collapsing, pulling back in fear. It wasn't fear. It was strategy. The land had been emptied on purpose. Food was removed, animals driven away, wells poisoned. The farther the crusaders marched, the weaker they became. Meanwhile, unseen hands opened dikes and redirected channels of the Nile, turning dry approaches into sudden lakes overnight. The invaders were no longer marching through Egypt. Egypt was closing around them. Then came Mansoura,
a fortress city braced behind thick walls, guarded by experienced commanders, its narrow streets shaped like traps. Between the Crusaders and the city flowed a branch of the Nile, its banks watched by the rising power of the Mamluks, hardened cavalry who had no intention of letting a foreign king rewrite the fate of their land. The Crusaders found a narrow ford, guided by a local convert who promised safe passage. At dawn, elite knights crossed first, led by Louis's brother, Robert of Artois. Hooves splashed, standards snapped. The moment demanded caution. Instead, it met pride. Seeing Egyptian forces fall back toward the city gates, Robert ordered a headlong charge. No coordination, no infantry support, no king's permission, just the thunder of armored horses rushing into streets designed for ambush, where the width of a lance mattered less than the width of an alley. And then the trap closed. From windows, rooftops, and hidden courtyards, Egyptian and Mamluk fighters struck. Arrows rained, spearmen surged, horses panicked on slick stone. Knights, mighty in open fields, became prisoners of their own armor in narrow lanes. Robert of Artois fell. With him fell the illusion of invincibility. The rest of the army tried to follow, too late and too disorganized. Battles bled into each other along the flooded banks. Supply ships ran aground or sank in mud-choked channels. The Nile, swollen and indifferent, swallowed wagons and men alike. What had begun as a glorious advance turned into a slow-motion disaster. Hunger, disease, exhaustion, and constant attack. The great crusading host was trapped between river and city, between faith and reality. In the camps, fever ripped through ranks, wounds infected, horses died faster than replacements could be found. Soldiers who had once sung hymns now whispered prayers of survival. Commanders argued. The king refused to abandon the cause, but the cause was now abandoning him. Then the final blow landed. The Mamluks launched a coordinated assault, striking with precision born from discipline and rage. Crusader lines buckled. Retreat became rout. The army that had once crossed the sea in confidence now staggered toward the riverbanks with one thought left: escape. But there was no escape. The Nile, once imagined as a highway to victory, became a barrier of water and mud. Bridges failed, boats were seized, men drowned beneath the weight of armor meant to save them. In the chaos, banners fell, and with them, the last sense of order. Louis IX, the king who had crossed oceans for a holy cause, found himself surrounded, weakened by illness, his army shattered. On the banks of the Nile, far from Jerusalem, far from triumph, a crusade built on certainty finally met its truth. The Seventh Crusade had not reclaimed the Holy Land. It had lost itself in Egypt. And for the first time, the King of France would learn what it meant not to command history, but to be at the mercy of it.
On the banks of the Nile, the battle was over, but the humiliation had only begun. The King of France, once surrounded by knights and banners, now sat beneath a crude tent, guarded not by loyal crusaders, but by Mamluk soldiers. Fever burned through his body. His armor had been taken. His sword was gone. For the first time in his life, Louis IX was not a ruler of men. He was their prisoner. Across the shattered landscape, the remnants of the Crusader army were rounded up. Wounded men staggered through mud. Others were dragged from reeds along the river. The songs of departure, the sermons of certainty, the grand promises of liberation, all of it lay buried beneath silence and defeat. The crusade was broken. The Mamluks knew the value of their captive. A king was not merely a trophy,
he was leverage. Negotiations began not with courtesy, but with cost: gold, territory, the city of Damietta, and above all, acknowledgement. The crusade had failed. Louis resisted at first. He had built his identity on obedience to God, on the belief that suffering was a test, not a verdict. But around him he saw the reality his prayers could not erase: starving soldiers, mass graves, despair in every face that once looked to him for certainty. Kings can command armies, they cannot command outcomes. Eventually, the bargain was struck. A staggering weight was agreed upon. Damietta was surrendered. The King of France, once marching under the banner of holy destiny, was exchanged like currency and released not in victory, but in consequence. Freedom did not feel like triumph. Louis remained in the East for years afterward, clinging to the dream that still hovered over the horizon: Jerusalem. Yet the world had changed. The Mamluks were rising. Alliances shifted like sand. Every attempt to reclaim what had been lost met the same wall: reality outweighed devotion. Back in Europe, the story was already being rewritten. To some, Louis was a saintly sufferer, a king who had borne captivity with grace. To others, he was the architect of catastrophe, a monarch whose certainty blinded him to strategy, whose faith led thousands into disaster. The Seventh Crusade did not just test an army, it tested the meaning of righteousness itself. Years later, Louis would launch yet another crusade. It would end not in Jerusalem, but in illness and death on foreign soil. Yet the legacy of the Seventh Crusade was already sealed. It revealed a hard truth hidden beneath banners and hymns: that belief, no matter how absolute, cannot bend rivers, cannot tame disease, cannot replace preparation or humility. It showed how a king can cross oceans to save a holy land and return having lost something more intimate: his illusions. The Nile still flows. The fields of Egypt are still green. And somewhere in the echo of history, the sails of a great French fleet still rise on the horizon, full of hope, full of certainty, heading towards a destiny that will not meet them halfway. This was the Seventh Crusade, a sacred war, a captive crown, and a reckoning written not in victory, but in the cost of believing that God guarantees success. As the echoes of the Seventh Crusade fade into history, one question remains: was it unwavering faith or unyielding pride that led a king across oceans into captivity? Tell us what you think. Was Louis IX a tragic hero, a stubborn idealist, or a ruler blinded by certainty? If you enjoyed this journey through the turning points of history, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Time's Battlefield, and share it with others who love powerful stories from the past. Your support helps us bring more forgotten wars, lost empires, and decisive moments back to life. This is Time's Battlefield, where history isn't just remembered, it's relived.